So it looks like you guys are doing two-a-days for a little bit. What does that look like, and maybe how does this stretch compare to last year, your first season?
Yeah, so been doing it this way for, gosh, 5, 6, 7 years, something like that. But the first, I thought I was running to get here, guys. I'm out of breath. But the first 3 days of practice, we just focus on just defense. It doesn't mean we don't have a ball or rims or anything like that, but we just really focus on all of our defensive principles, trying to install, situational defenses. And we don't even coach offense a whole lot other than, just kind of the mentality. So all of our defensive drills, and we call it defensive boot camp. It probably sounds a lot worse than it is type of thing, but we come in the mornings before school and then come back and do a second practice in the afternoons. And we do that for 3 days, so we're kind of dead in the middle of it right now.
Coach, with this roster, does it have more of that length and athleticism and things that you kind of value when it comes to playing defense and being aggressive?
No question. I think if you look positionally across the board with our lineups and our summer practices and our fall workouts, and here are the first couple days, you take out Doolin Hayden, you lose a little length in size at that 5 spot. But outside of that, we're bigger and longer and deeper at every position in terms of length and athleticism.
Last year sometimes it almost became like David DeJulius was the only offensive playmaker. How much of a priority is it, and was it, and now is it for you to make sure you have several playmakers entering the season?
That was a huge priority, right? And Keith, there's 2 ways we tried to attack that. Like, we knew we had to get a lot more versatile offensively. We knew we had to really improve offensively. And I think what'll happen when you have new faces, we have 6 new faces, is people will focus on those new faces, but you can't overshadow what happened before that, and that's that the 7 returning guys have really improved. They made a commitment not just to their game, but to their body, to their mentality, their maturity. And so the skill sets of our returning players, along with other aspects of the game, have really improved. That'll make us better offensively in itself. And then you do add some new guys with some offensive ability. And I do think there's a lot more playmaking on the floor. And there's a lot more guys I think you can dial up offensive action to. We've made some other changes structurally as well in terms of kind of opening it up in transition, and I think that'll develop more easy shots for this team and high percentage shots.
I'm guessing Lander's going to kind of be one of those guys who's a big offensive piece for you. How have you seen him look so far, and how do you think him and David will play together?
Yeah, I mean, we knew that was a priority in recruiting in the spring, was to make sure we added a go-to type of offensive guy on the perimeter, and Landers addressed that. And you know that because you look at what he's accomplished to this point in his career as an offensive player. He's been a double-figure scorer for basically his whole career. When we scouted him, playing against him at Memphis last year, we were so concerned with his shooting. And his shooting is as advertised. He can really shoot the basketball. The thing that really surprised us this summer as we got into practice is, man, he's pretty good with the ball in his hands. Like, we think he's a guy that, can handle it in the open floor. You can put him in ball screen action or on-ball action, and not just finish plays with his shooting, but we think he can create plays for our team too. And, I think him among other guys, but I think, Dave's noticed that right away and knows that'll take a little pressure off of him creating.
How different is it having a full season now in your, back pocket, to where maybe you're not constantly working on install or working on, getting the kids to understand your expectations, and now you can kind of get into the little bit more advanced stuff earlier?
It's night and day. I've said this to a lot of people that have asked in passing. If you take where we are as a team today compared to where we were as a team on this day last year, it's not even close. That doesn't mean anything if we don't continue to do the right things. And that's not knocking anybody in particular from last year's. There's a lot more familiarity. there's continuity. You know, at this point last year, some of the stuff that we were really having to spend time teaching or installing, it's kind of already established, right? So you're able to kind of get to that next level in terms of what we're teaching and what we're working on. So year two, not just for me as a head coach, but for everybody in the program, you know, you're just a lot further along at this stage.
Looking at those guys that are in year one, Josh Reed, Sage Tolentino, Daniel Skillings, we all know there can be a wide range of responsibilities for freshmen in college basketball. What are your expectations for those three guys?
Well, you know, I'm excited about them. They've all been, you know, I hope they don't pay attention to this press conference, because I hope they feel like they stink right now as freshmen. That's how it's supposed to feel in your first 2 days of practice. They've been great. They're all three really gifted. They all have great positional size and length. They've all kind of shown the ability to learn and handle coaching, which sometimes you don't know that till you coach somebody, but you can explain something to them, show them something, whether it's out on the floor in film, and they can go do it. And that really bodes well for guys being able to grow quickly. So we've been really pleased with them. Now, you know, if you talk to them, they probably don't think they're doing well because they're freshmen, right? And the game's faster than it's ever been for them. They're learning new principles. You know, even when you have, you know, Rob and Landers, we call Landers Ches, so people might have to get used to me saying that in the press conference because it'll slip some, but Rob and Landers and Kalu, I mean, those guys, even though they're coming from other programs, like, they understand some of the base principles that you have in a college basketball game, whether it's defensively or offensively or the pace. So they're gonna be able to get up to speed a little faster. You know, when you're a freshman, it's coming at you quickly, and it's obviously coming at those three quickly, and they might not always feel like they're handling it well, but they've been really impressive to our coaching staff and to our older players.
Coach, when you were hired and built your staff, Chad Dollar was the one guy that you hadn't previously worked with. He was promoted this week to associate head coach. Just take us through what he's meant, the relationship you've built with him, and why he's now a guy you trust in that position.
Yeah, you know, I think it's really important to our staff moving forward, you know, to kind of make that adjustment. The first thing with Chad is his experience. I mean, he's the most experienced person on our staff, maybe not in head coaching experience, but in terms of just college basketball coaching experience and high major coaching experience. And I've been blown away with not just that experience, but his ability to articulate some of the things that he's learned, to articulate his perspective. And he's really been this incredible sounding board for me as a head coach in year one. He's kind of been the stabilizer, you know, I mean, Mike and I worked together, I guess 10 or 11 years now. We're like a married couple, for gosh sakes. And, you know, Coach Morgan and I are very similar. You know, we're high energy and, you know, that type of thing. Chad's the stability on our staff. And when we get into those meetings and we're trying to make tough decisions, and I've gotten in those situations that you always get as a head coach where you got to make the hard decisions, he's been the guy whose counsel and advice has really helped me. And so, you know, part of it was he's earned it. The other part of it was I want our staff to understand there's a hierarchy and his voice really matters. And I want him to have the confidence to know that I want him to speak up more, whether it's with our players, whether it's on the court, whether it's in the locker room, or whether it's in staff meetings, or whether it's opening my door when I need to hear something that maybe I don't want to hear. I want him to know that I have the confidence and I'm putting him in a role that I expect him to do that.
You touched on Landers coming in, but you guys also add a guy like Rob to pair with David DeJulius, who has now going on his 5th season of college basketball. Talk about how great it is to have that veteran leadership in the backcourt, and what have you seen from a guy like Rob so far?
Yeah, I mean, look at our backcourt right now, and you didn't mention Micah, right? But you got Micah, Rob, and David. So you got, you know, 3 guards with an unbelievable amount of basketball experience at the college level and high level games, right? And so we feel really good about the combination of those 3. You know, you almost wish you had one more, because 3, you know, the one thing you always want on a roster is ball handling and decision making. And you know, you always want 4 guys that you feel could play point guard, and so we're gonna put some pressure on CJ Anthony to kind of get up to speed here as a redshirt freshman, or I'm sorry, as a sophomore. Even though he's a non-scholarship player, we believe in him. But I do think those 3 guys, between Micah, Rob, and Dave, you know, not just who they are offensively, but who they're capable of being defensively. I think we addressed what we needed to address in terms of making sure we were prepared at the point guard position going into this year.
Hey Wes, back here. You've had 1 year to kind of start steering this program back in the right direction. What does year 2 look like for you as far as that next step goes, and just your expectations for this program?
You know, these are the answers that aren't good for, you know, fans or journalists, but they're the real answers. It's only about today for me and for our program. And it's not just an answer to the media, a cop-out. Like, the only thing I'm concerned about is us getting better today. I don't care about yesterday. Hopefully we learned from something that happened yesterday or last year, but we're not gonna focus or dwell on it. Can't control anything tomorrow. Like, we are going to get insane and obsessed about maximizing what we can do as a program and as a team to get better today. And we're trying to get that mindset instilled in our guys to this stage, and it's early. They've really embraced that in terms of the off season and this summer. And I do believe, and I always have, that if you really can execute that type of mindset and that one day at a time approach, I think the results that we all want are gonna find us, and I think they'll find us sooner rather than later.
Looking at guys like Shuey and JD, what do you want to see from them as far as improvement and growth? What are areas that you really want to see them take some steps in this season?
Yeah, well, you know, so I'll start with Micah. I thought he did a terrific job of taking care of the ball last year. So obviously I hope that continues, and I believe it will. I want him to kind of create more offense for us, you know, at the point guard position. I think he can do that by making simpler plays, getting the ball out of his hands a little earlier, and that's something we've been working on this summer, and he's done well at that. I want him to shoot a better percentage from 3. He's worked as hard on his jumper this summer. We had a lot of guys, so it wouldn't be fair to rank him, but he's in that group of guys that have really focused on his shooting and his catch and shoot, and I want him to shoot a better percentage from 3. I think that's really important at the guard position. And he's always been a really reliable defender. I want him to be one of the best defenders at his position in our conference and in the country. And again, he's taken some steps this offseason. He's had a really good offseason among a bunch of other guys.
2 more questions?
The other question was about Rob.
JD.
JD.
Yep.
You know, Jeremiah, the first thing with Jeremiah was, like, you know, evolving physically. And his offseason with Mike Rayfeld was really important, and he's done his job there. He's leaner, he's moving better, which will allow him to, I think, defend at a higher level and guard different positions. So that was number 1, and I thought he did that. I wanted him to continue to do that. Offensively, obviously we know about his shooting, but being a little bit more versatile offensively, making better decisions with the ball in his hands, because the ball is gonna be in his hands and was in his hands a lot. Being stronger with the ball and having better balance with the ball around the basket. Those are some of the things that we talked about, and again, he's done his part up until now, and we gotta continue to do that as we get into preseason. I'll tell you guys, just in terms of like maturity and mental approach, Jeremiah Davenport in the last couple months may have made the biggest jump of anybody I've ever coached in that short of a time frame. And I'm not saying he was immature, but in the last 2 months, he's been really, really consistent, really, really mature in terms of what he's about every day, whether he's in the building or not in the building, and I'm really proud of that. I think if that continues, you know, usually that stuff trickles onto the court, and we're seeing that already. I think it'll just continue.
Got time for 1 more question, then Coach Dollar.
You alluded to it with JD, but are you seeing the benefits of a full offseason with Mike for all those guys?
It's a great question, Justin. You know, I think sometimes you got to put it in perspective. We had a lot of guys on this roster that hadn't put an off season together in years. You know, I'll just give you a couple examples, and there's more than the ones I'm gonna give you. Vic probably had never had an elite offseason, and it's not his fault. You know, he comes over and he's injured, and he's dealing with the surgery, and he's dealing with rehab. You know, then the coaching change occurs. He's still not 100% cleared. He goes back home for a month. He comes back, and then he fights injuries. My first year here, so last summer, he fight injuries all summer. So it was all about just getting healthy, and the first time he was healthy was kind of as we were starting playing games. So he never had an off season. I think you saw that with Vic last year as the year went on. Physically, it was hard for him to sustain his level of play because he didn't have a chance to do the work to put in a physical foundation. John Newman, you know, he hadn't had an off season in 3 years, and I won't give you his whole background. I'll let you guys dig on that, but he had not put an off season together in 3 years. And if you look at our whole roster, whether it's the pandemic or transition in terms of transferring, that continuity that you have being in the same place, working with the same coaches, whether it's on the floor, in the weight room, that stuff really matters. And our returning guys, man, the jumps that they made physically and the jumps they've made in their skill set have been tremendous because they actually had a real off season without some of those distractions, whether it's coaching changes or pandemics or things of that nature. They're being healthy, and I think that could bode well for our team, you know, especially come January, February. That's when the off season really shows, right at the end of the season.
All right, thanks, Coach.
All right, thanks, guys.